Yo, what is up? Yo, what is good, guys? I'm back with another video, and as you can see, this is not my typical, setup. I just I was shopping, but I figured I kind of just kill two birds with one stone with this video, just because originally I was intending to make a video listing my top 5 moments in CHH in 2024, but in being caught up with the series in itself on my Instagram page, I just decided, like, why not put it on here, but also just add a little bit extra for you guys that are sub to the channel here, and kind of just make this like a 2-part video. So the first part will just kind of be my thoughts on some recent stuff that happened around the space that I didn't have time to make a video about, essentially. And then the second half of the video, if you already haven't seen it, it'll basically be just like a rerun of like the top 5 moments in the space, especially for people who just never saw the full series altogether. So it'll be packaged up into one section for you guys towards the second half of the video, and then that's about it. So yeah, as you can see, middle of winter right now. Middle of winter, man. And I guess like the first thing I wanted to cover for this video was really the recent, I guess, like, I mean, it had a bit of buzz, but I figured, like, why not just cover it in a quick little hold on, all right, I just have to quickly beat this light. So I guess like the first news I wanted to cover was like, it made a bit of buzz, really, but it was just, I thought it was kind of interesting, was just the whole thing with No Big Deal and John Key. I mean, basically Proper Excel, they started a whole discussion about the use of theology in Christian hip hop, or more so if Christian rappers are they also called to be pastors, essentially. If we're gonna have Christian rappers, we might as well have pastors, right? And I don't know, I think it was just interesting because the thing is it started like, and thankfully it didn't get toxic, but it started like a good back and forth, you know what I mean? There was a clip as well of John Key talking about it. I can't remember what show it was on, but there was a clip of John Key talking about it, and they brought up some good solid points about why as fans we shouldn't conflate the two, just because, you know what I mean, that's kind of how it's always been, right? If you're gonna have Christian music, if you're gonna have Christian rap, you might as well have these artists, be speakers or pastors, really.
It's like, yo, I'm not your pastor, right? You know what I mean? Like, I love God, I live for the Lord, but like there's pastors are held to a certain standard, and they want to put us up there as well, which is an honor to be looked at like that. But it's like, yo, I'm a human too. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Like we turn up, we have fun. All those kind of things.
You can see it, bro. And the thing is too, though, like, we turn up, we have fun, and also like we get angry. Yeah, we get sad, we fall in love. Like,
what are y'all, human?
It's, you know what I'm saying? Like,
but the thing is like, I think they did build a strong point with the fact that leading a congregation and pastoring, like, that is completely different than being an artist. Being an artist does have the same characteristics of having a platform to speak on, but the thing is being a pastor and being an artist are 2 different things. I think even someone brought up, it's funny because a lot of people were laughing that Rusan said no to this guy, but I think somebody was trying to use a point or analogy of, like, comparing a Christian hip hop artist to a worship pastor, which is kind of like, nah, dog, nah. Like, I wasn't buying it, I'm not gonna lie. Just because to me, worship is completely different than like contemporary music. In that, like, contemporary music, that's like, I don't know, that's like something you listen to when you're in a different mood, right? If you want to listen to something that is upbeat, high energy, something to pump you up, to get your day going, like that, to me, that's completely different than like worship, which is essentially like a heart posture. When you're worshiping God, like, at least from my understanding, you're in a posture of worship, and you're in a posture of like being intimate with the Lord. And the thing with Christian rap, and this is where it all ties up, and they do make a good point, is that, these artists are not people's pastors. You know what I mean? These artists are not your pastors. Artists want to share and, talk about their stories. But the thing is it doesn't have to come with the package of being theologically qualified, which is another thing as well, that a good point they brought up, to lead, to be a pastor, to shepherd, does require being theologically qualified. And that's completely different than being an artist, right? If you're gonna call these people to be pastors, then you might as well say that they have to be qualified. Sorry guys, my battery died, so I'm gonna just continue off where I left off. But basically the whole point of what I was trying to wrap up with that is that I think there's like a misunderstanding fundamentally of the difference between like regular contemporary music and like worship music. Like, those are 2 different states of music that are completely separate, right? You know what I mean? Like, I don't have to listen to something that's not worship for it to still be God honoring, right? So that's the whole point. But the second point, interestingly enough, I think, especially with No Big Deal and his comments on that whole interaction, I think what it exposed in my eyes is essentially like, I think there's like, from a consumer standpoint, there's like a flawed understanding, like not even theologically, but there's a flawed understanding of how Christians consume and interpret music. No Big Deal, and the way he handled that whole situation, like, I think it exposed a gap in the average like consumer and how they interpret music. Just because I think for the longest time too, this has always exposed this whole of like listeners in the Christian market listening to certain lyrics and taking it the wrong way. And then from that understanding, just taking it and running with it and kind of just saying like, yo, this guy's like misusing scripture, misinterpreting it, and like all that stuff, really. I can't remember exactly what his comment was, but sorry, his car there. I mean, I'll leave it there. But I think it had to do with certain lyrics he was talking about. I'm not gonna lie, I can't even bring it to mind, but essentially it's like when you go through these people's comments and their exchanges back and forth, it kind of just tells me that listeners don't give Christian artists the benefit of the doubt, essentially, whenever they listen to, you know, a Christian artist. You know what I mean? Like, so there's that, right? I think it exposed like a gaping hole in that aspect. And then another thing too is like, and Rusan made such a good point with this, is that like this whole, I'll play the clip in a bit, but this whole conversation essentially creates an entire deficit in Christians who end up, quote unquote, being like playing the role of like being a secret Christian or whatever in the public space, not wanting to be known specifically as a Christian artist, because not because they're ashamed of the gospel, not because they don't have anything to do with Jesus or anything like that, like there's a shame to it, but like directly to the gospel or anything like that and their identity. But it's like, it's more so a shame with how like the culture reacts, essentially, and how like it's hard to live up to that pressure, essentially. Like it's something that you have to essentially think about, and it creates barriers, you know what I mean, for the average person thinking about getting into Christian music. Like, man, like what do I want to be known by, you know, by my listeners, right? What is this gonna cause? What effect is this gonna have, right? And so Rusan in this clip, he talked about how he has close artists, close friends that have been around the Christian circle. Didn't say any names, but you know, people that they are believers, they are Christian, but because they're aware of this deficit, like the consumer and the fan base, you know, they've created, it's really hard to basically like definitively say that I'm going to brand myself as a Christian artist, right?
Now, I'm not saying that this is a grounds for lawlessness. I'm not saying that there are no longer standards for Christian creatives. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is the more you try to handcuff Christian creative people to the standard of your local church pastor, your local worship pastor, the more you're going to get watered down, superficial, cringe art, cringe music, cringe movies, because you're handcuffing people to a standard. And oftentimes, by the way, you do this and you hold people to a standard that you can't even hold scripture to. We get this a lot with, hey, why is there not enough Jesus per minute? Why is there not Jesus per minute in this Christian rap song? Why is this song about having fun, turning up? Why is this song about love? And it's like, you know, there's books in the Bible that don't mention God? The book of Esther? You mean there's parables where Jesus talked and he doesn't mention God overtly? You mean there's time, right? There's these examples. And so you're holding rappers and artists to standards you can't even hold the scriptures to. And had you had a local pastor in your life to hold you to the standards of the scripture, you wouldn't be making such fallacies. So that's my issue with this.
So yeah, as you can see, I'm wrapping up a hoop session right now. But yeah, no. So honestly, like closing thoughts. Yeah, to just wrap everything up, honestly, my whole take on the situation, I kind of think like, number one, I don't want to oppose anyone with opposing opinions to this. If you feel like artists are not theologically sound and it's a very prominent issue, it's a very big issue, like that's understandable, you know what I mean? I think in this whole thing, I kind of just hold to the fact that that comment that the person made to No Big Deal kind of exposed that, to be honest, the fans, the listeners can also have skewed theology, or not theology, but like interpretation when it comes to hip hop and music, just because I've kind of seen that part over the years as well, where a lot of listeners will misinterpret and let bars go over their heads and kind of run with what someone said when they clearly didn't. And that's kind of like just one example of it. So I found it eye-opening at least. But yeah, overall, this whole thing, I mean, you can follow the rest of the story on Proper Excel online in their comment section. Because there's a lot more interesting takes. I know John, he had a few good points as well. You should definitely check out his stuff. And also, speaking of John, he recently announced that he's dropping an album this year, which doesn't feel too early for John to drop an album. Like, just because it feels like Ermos just dropped the other day. And even though that was in 2023, realistically, like it doesn't feel that long ago that he dropped Ermos, but here we are, right? It's nearly been 2 years coming up and he's about to drop another body of work, right? It's interesting. Overall though, that's pretty much it from me. That's the end of the video. Like I said, this is like a 2-in-1 video, so the second half of the video playing will pretty much be the top 5 moments from 5 to 1 this year from my Proper Excel series. So Yeah, guys, take care. Enjoy the video if you do stay to the end, and I will see you next video. Next one is going to be special. Bye.
So I think it's pretty fair to place Christian nightclubs up here at number 5, especially because it was a pretty huge wave and trend that got sparked up pretty late last year into the top and beginning of 2024. Though honestly, Christian nightclubs have not been a new concept, as the idea of it was actually going on since the 90s, but just the idea of bringing young adults together has definitely been something that has been in more demand than ever recently, especially now that we've seen more reports and record highs of social isolation, particularly among Gen Z post-pandemic. And I saw a lot of pushback for it early on, with people being concerned or just not liking the theory of mixing young Christians with the word club, but honestly, I think it's gone way better than how people were originally perceiving it to be. The opportunity to meet people outside of your daily circle of church and small groups is really needed, as not everyone has the opportunity to find the right group of people that they can effortlessly fit in and interact with. And the emergence of the Christian nightclub wave also spoke into the issue of young Christians who have always had to be more creative and active socially just to find fellowship and network outside of places that just aren't really affirmative to their faith values, like traditional nightclubs, college parties, and just places where a lot of peer pressure can take place, as young Christians will struggle to find themselves in the midst of figuring out their faith, their whole life ahead of them, and some of the more foundational parts of their lives. And it's a big reason too why I believe we see people falling away from the faith straight out of high school into their young adult years at times, because of the lack of relationship and community building in a society that's more isolated than ever. And yes, we do have church, yes, we have Bible studies, but sometimes a different variation of fellowship is needed for some people that feel like they're out of touch within their own communities at times, as not everyone might be in an area with people around their age demographic, and people can feel distant even in their own churches at times. So the concern of the idea of making a Christian nightclub has always been valid, but I think with the right way I've been seeing it piloted throughout 2024, it's ended up exploding rapidly because Christians generally want to be in a faith-affirming environment. So places like The Cove in Nashville, The Ark in Atlanta, Joyful Noise in Orlando, and Club 217 in Los Angeles are the result of this, and some of the many places even opening up to the point that they're requesting the owners of some of these pages to host events in neighboring cities. So it's crazy seeing the explosion and takeoff of Christian nightclubs in 2024, and just how it was fueled by a longing to build relationships with other believers outside of their local areas. And I believe it's even opened up a new social market and infrastructure within younger adults by spiraling creativity to inspire other event ideas like Christian DJing, gospel skate nights, community barbecues, and places that can be opportunities to either potentially reach people or encourage other believers in their faith.
That's a great question. I think biblically it's that aspect of we all need each other, and I think this is a unique aspect or event for a certain demographic.
So jumping in at number 4, record labels throughout CHH have always been a solid startup to develop the next generation of artists. And for the longest time, that staple and label standard was always held by Reach Records within Christian hip-hop. For most artists, especially when they were starting out, the end goal or big milestone, it seemed, was to somehow end up at a Christian record label like Reach, as they were the most branded and commercially accessible CHH label available out there. And over the years prior to and after Reach, the music game and landscape shifted as artists started realizing that they wanted to redefine their own values and visions for Christian music, and started forming their own labels, group collectives, services, and more. Whether if it was the early Cross Movement era, God Over Money, Humble Beast over the years, RMG, Collision Records who had a small run, World 45, or more. Though starting up a label wasn't the easiest thing to pull off, as it wasn't by any means easy to navigate. Though over the years, especially currently in 2024, I think we've seen the most investment and expansion into the label market out of any other year. And to kick off 2024, we had the self-startup and forming of Aliens Alive by Rodney Jerkins. And he really took his time with handpicking a variety of artists for this startup label. The roster makeup of TJ Carroll, I Am Rescued, Gavi, Alex Jean, and John Keith is a well-rounded team of artists, as they've not only been slowly kicking out several releases within this year, but thanks to Rodney's 35 plus years within the music industry, they've been able to branch into different music sectors in and out of Christian music. So being able to connect with editorials, platforms like BT Jams or Revolt, and recently plugging into places like Rolling Loud Miami and much more, tells me that Rodney is truly invested in the next generation of artists. And recently speaking with artists like TJ Carroll at Holy Smoke, who's been working on a patient and timely project himself, set to release this February, I'm definitely confident that him and a few others are ready to turn up and expand this space in 2025. And they weren't the only label on the block in 2024, as Tribal Records, who's had a previous history of working with other Christian genres, have slowly been testing the waters into the CHH market as well. From my knowledge, I haven't seen any official signings on their own end, but more so a lot of of releases for singles branded as partnerships with some artists like TKG Kai, J Manuel, Angie Rose, and Keon Boone, each individually partnering up with Tribal on their own terms. So no record deals set in stone really, but honestly I kind of like this model they're going for, especially because it's a good way to test the waters and kind of give artists more flexibility on their end, sticking to smaller deals for singles, because I think it'll help up and coming artists access more resources and just kind of give them a trial run to see if a record deal even makes sense. And then, you know, lastly, with Capitol, a more established record label, they've been somewhat active around the CHH space as well, but this has been the most active I've seen them in quite a while, particularly with picking up Childlike CC and Geo, two amazing pickups that have more than outperformed anyone's expectations and have shown that the right people will find you if you know how to carve out your own story inside Christian music, which is what honestly makes their approach to music unique to them, as Capitol this year helped them roll out their respective debut projects, the It's Time EP and Nobody Else the album, and they're showing that there's a lot of value and potential expansion in 2025. So number 4 on my list is definitely the female expansion of Christian hip-hop. Generally, when it comes to conversation, I don't like to divide the community into a box of only female CHH artists and male CHH artists, because to me, I really think anyone can be a great artist regardless of gender. But I definitely see how the growth of the female CHH space is important to the community, especially because everyone speaks into different people's lives differently. And there are different audiences for different people. And I'm always interested in highlighting different stories, sounds, and areas around the community, as seeing expansion shows that Christian hip-hop isn't relegated to one type of audience. And for a lot of female artists this year, they've been expanding the space in many and multiple ways. It's particularly interesting seeing fresh faces to the hip-hop scene this year, with Childlike CC signing to Capitol Records, an artist who had a huge self-made run as an independent artist this year, and who was then able to generate that leverage into getting herself into a great situation at Capitol. And for years up until this point, there were some occasional signings by key artists before her time, but there weren't too many except a few that had found themselves at the doorsteps of a major one at that. But she was one of 2 artists this year that was able to dig and reach for a deal that perfectly fit her situation. She's been blessed enough to use her reach and platform to find different and innovative ways to promote her music while intentionally testifying into other people's lives. So collaborating with her followers to share their testimonies before and after being saved while simultaneously playing her singles has shown a great approach and market to promoting music that I haven't seen used before as an artist around Christian music. And there are other artists as well expanding into the space this year that are showing us how to scratch the surface to newer sounds. Artists like Ali Minju, who often in my eyes looks like she's experimenting with different forms and influences of hyperpop, Korean pop, and other styles of music too. You know, that's an artist that I've seen grow fairly well throughout 2024 and is slowly growing into her own personality and artistry going into 2025. I see a lot of room creatively for her to try different sounds that this space hasn't scratched and fully experienced yet, especially around hyperpop. Also Toya Love as well, who I've seen injecting a new variety of melodic trap with her vocals around that grassroots trap sound, something that's been expansive to not only finding newer sounds into that Christian trap space, but also finding new female artists to listen to this year. And then when you move even further back into the summer, we have that huge move with Jackie Hill Perry making her return to music this year, which is a big move to the needle and pull for female CHH artists, and the added variety and potential to push more weight and depth amongst the growing base of both male and female listeners. I just think her return along with her EP run has been a great shift for the space as a whole and encouragement to younger aspiring female artists in the future. It's been great to run into her music again, rebirthed and redefined 10 years later, now releasing music under Reach Records. And speaking of Reach, we also have Anike, who to her own capacity and credit put a lot of effort into releasing a long-awaited album for 4 years. Anike, a project with strong production value and name meaning since her name change. She's an artist that recently smashed some big milestones with being the first female hip-hop artist to perform at the Dove Awards, and then followed that up with headlining a sold-out show that she and her friends put together, which I don't know if I've seen a female artist headline their own independent event to this scale, but to my knowledge, it's the first of its kind to this sold-out capacity. Overall though, seeing more female artists down south and out west, over out east, and in more places just shows me what the space is capable of and where it can go. Christian hip-hop can thrive much better when there's a story and outreach to different people like we're called to. So dignifying and big-upping that expansion of female CHH artists this year is definitely a great way to go out for 2024 at number 3. So I think I'm going to place these on the radar freestyles at a strong 2 on this list, simply due to the floodgate of artists we've seen come on and do their thing respectively on their platform. Normally, I love discovering new, old, and sometimes interesting performances on OTR.
Into my mommy.
It's always a great place to find new artists, but this year was great finally seeing Christian artists come on through and also let people know that there is Christian hip-hop out there and that there is a market and space for Christians within hip-hop. We saw a lot of different performances, but I definitely say that my favorite ones from Rap for the Kingdom and I were from Aaron Cole. You know, I'd say he really flowed on this one.
This not a game, it's a championship. Career like my underbite, big as my lips. Straight from Virginia, they couldn't predict. So making these dollars not making no sense. God is my weapon across on my head. I pray every day, I ain't making no wish. Count me out a few more, matter of fact, I insist. My life is so tailored, I'm moving a swift.
No big deal, with possibly the best consensus performance.
Walking on the beat like it was water if you get the drift. Tennessee boy, but I can never do the 666. When they say the Christians isn't spitting, you just send them this. Yeah, hey. Rap about God, not a rap god, I ain't Eminem.
MTM Isaiah holding down New York and showing that you can flip New York drill into something passionate and really God-honoring.
You cannot put your trust up in this world, cause one day it's all gonna pass. Gotta get right with the king right now, or you gonna be under his wrath. Don't think that you gonna prosper in your sin, cause God sits in the heaven and laughs. Choosing his word over God is like throwing your soul in the trash.
DKG Kai with embodying the perfect combination of showing fruit and where you're from with that native Detroit flow.
Screaming death to my whole life now, let's have a funeral. You ain't talking about the Lord and Savior, that's unusual. Got the Bible strapped to my hip, it ain't losable. Life and death be living in the tongue, just know it's choosable. Let's recycle Old Testament, it's reusable. Take your old life and make it new, just know it's doable.
Alex Jean with kind of going in the direction with Afrobeats this year, in addition to his many styles of music.
I wanna dance to the sunlight go. Give me your hand so you hold me close. I open up the word and it gave me hope. Through all the way and every time that I should have been gone.
And Caleb Gordon. You know, I don't know if he ever released this, but this joint was pretty fire, I'm not gonna lie.
See the verdict crescendo before I could finish my sentence. He called my name like you would call in the tennis. Back and forth like I play tennis. Didn't go to jail, but I was a menace. If I kept going the way I was going, then I knew that soon that I would regret it. Open the word and I eat it like lettuce. Eat it up, beat it up, and don't forget it. The devil tried to talk to me.
2024 was the year that I nor anyone fully expected to see an OTR takeover. And what I love is that it showed that it doesn't have to take one big or several Christian hip-hop artists to move the culture in space, but rather a wave of artists giving it their all for the kingdom. And I definitely can't wait to see what the standard is in 2025, man. And what do you guys think will be the #1 moment this year as we wrap up 2024 on the final and #1 spot? Next video.
I'm loving this new wave of Christian R&B.
Christian R&B.
Christian R&B. Christian R&B.
Now, Christian R&B is by no means technically CHH, but without a doubt, I just had to put Christian R&B at my #1 spot on this list for moments in 2024. Christian R&B is something that I believe people have been anticipating for years on end for, as it's quietly snowballed into collective demand over the last 6 to 7 years. There was a growing community of people affiliated to or adjacent to Christian hip-hop that were really more suited for a sound and space outside of hip-hop. But at the time, it wasn't big enough to just give it a name yet. There were some artists that you could tell who were purely concentrated in R&B, while others you could just tell that they were flirting or crossing over between the idea of the two. And CHH was just sonically expanding, and it just got to the point that a lot of people were pushing into new genres and avenues. So it was great knowing that at the top of the year, we were really introduced to a rush of new artists and artists that have been floating around who unintentionally burst into this new age or renaissance of Christian music. We're talking everybody from Sajay to Don Reddy, Sam Rivera, Stevie Rizzo, Aaron Dews, Lee Vasi, Jay Manuel, Madison Ryan Ward, St. James, George Rose, Young Chris, Mike Teasy. You know, this list extends well beyond the artists named inside the video, but my point is that you just didn't have a few people dabbling into Christian R&B anymore. It became a seismic collection of artists that opened a gold rush in response to people everywhere. People that weren't necessarily looking for a Christian version or template of an R&B artist, but rather people that were looking for a Christian alternative to a genre that mainly promoted toxic relationship telling, lustful fantasies, and their own vices. You know, people actually wanted something that spoke life into their introspections of pure love, how to deal with breakups, the idea of marriage, and much more. A place where original R&B used to be, and a place that I think made it acceptable to trend this term used a lot in 2024, Christian R&B, or CR&B for short. And ultimately, I think a big moving piece for next year is definitely seeing more addition to new creatives in the space, and seeing if any major or independent labels will take their shot at signing any of these artists, as I'd love to see Christian R&B take shape and expand. Plenty of artists under Christian R&B have always shown the ability to produce and write adjacent to hip-hop, as their natural affinity for R&B is what they're more casually inspired by. Though I think it was just a matter of time before a lot of these artists were bound to be in demand. And the explosion of Christian R&B definitely shaped itself well into its own space in 2024, whether if it was through neo soul, pop, blends of gospel, fusion, and more. Though 2025 is hopefully the new dawn and Genesis at midnight for what's to arrive in the distant future.
Every time I would meet people and say, I'm a gospel artist, they'd be like, oh, cool, what's the name of your choir? Or what church do you sing at? And I would be like, nah, not like that. Like, I remember praying on it. And I remember even telling God, like, I'm done with being a gospel artist. That's not working. And I remember praying on it. And like, I even shed a tear, if I'm being honest. And I was telling God, like, I don't want to do this. Like, give me something that resonates with the people. My feeling the whole time when I felt like he showed me Christian R&B, I felt like it was a thing that was bigger than me. I didn't feel like he gave me something. I felt like he gave me something to like that to be a vessel of.